There is a voice in your head, and it has been shaping your life for years without asking for permission. It speaks in your tone. It uses your memories. It sounds like truth. But it isn't truth. It's interpretation. And if you don't learn how to confront it, it will quietly decide who you become. Most people never notice when it begins. It doesn't start loud. It starts small. A thought, a reaction, a judgment. You hesitate in a conversation and later your mind says, "That was awkward." Nothing unusual, but then it adds something else. That's why people don't take you seriously. Now it's no longer a moment. It's a conclusion. And this is where the shift happens. Not in reality, but in meaning. Before we continue, I don't need anything from you. But if you find value in this video, if it resonates with you, I'd really appreciate it if you could take a moment, only if you want, to like, comment, clarity. Share it with someone who might need it, or maybe subscribe to the Stoic Legion. If not, that's completely fine. No pressure. Let's move forward. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus warned about this exact process nearly 2,000 years ago. He said, "Men are disturbed not by things, but by the views they take of them." Think about that carefully. He wasn't speaking in theory. He was describing something happening in your mind right now. Events are neutral, but your mind refuses to leave them that way. It interprets, it labels, it concludes, and then it presents those conclusions as facts. The dangerous part is not that this happens. The dangerous part is how convincing it feels. Cognitive psychology calls this cognitive fusion, the tendency to become so entangled with your thoughts that you can no longer distinguish between what you think and what is real. In other words, you don't just have thoughts, you become them. And once that happens, questioning them feels unnatural. You don't argue with your thoughts, you obey them. But here's the uncomfortable truth most people avoid. Your mind is not designed to tell you the truth. It is designed to keep you alive. That's it. Not happy, not confident, not fulfilled, just alive. And to do that, it prioritizes threat over accuracy. It exaggerates risk. It magnifies mistakes. It replays failures. This is called the negativity bias, a survival mechanism wired into your brain long before modern life existed. Thousands of years ago, this bias kept humans alive. Missing one threat could mean death. So the mind evolved to overdetect danger. But today the threats are different. They're social, they're internal, they're imagined. And yet your mind still reacts as if everything is life or death. A small embarrassment becomes a threat. A mistake becomes evidence. And your mind treats both with the same urgency it once reserved for survival. That's why your thoughts feel intense. That's why they feel urgent, and that's why they feel true. But intensity is not evidence. It's just amplification. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful men in history, understood this deeply. Despite ruling an empire, he spent his nights writing reminders to himself. Notes we now know as meditations. Not because he lacked power, but because he refused to let his mind distort reality. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." Notice what he didn't say. He didn't say you control your thoughts. He said you control your mind. There's a difference. Thoughts appear automatically, but your response to them, that's where control exists. And yet most people never reach that point because they never pause. Everything happens too fast. A thought appears, it feels true, they react, and within seconds it's already shaping their behavior. But what if you slowed it down? Not completely, just slightly. A thought appears. You're going to fail. Before you would accept it, now you observe it. You notice its tone, certain, final, authoritative. But then you ask a question that changes everything. Is this true or just familiar? That question is dangerous, not to you, but to the illusion your mind has been maintaining. Because most of your limiting thoughts are not built on evidence. They're built on repetition. The more often a thought appears, the less you question it. This is how identity is formed, not through truth, but through repetition. Carl Jung captured this with unsettling precision. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Read that again. What you call who you are may just be a collection of thoughts you never challenged, and that realization is uncomfortable because it means your limitations may not be real. They may be practiced. But here's where it gets even more uncomfortable. Your suffering often feels useful. There is a hidden belief that being hard on yourself is a form of discipline, that if you criticize yourself enough, you'll improve. That harshness equals growth. But look at the results. Does constant self-criticism make you act faster, or does it make you hesitate more? Does it create clarity, or does it create noise? Seneca observed, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." And that suffering doesn't push you forward. It traps you. It keeps you analyzing instead of acting. It convinces you that thinking is progress, when in reality it's just avoidance disguised as effort. This is the twist most people don't expect. Overthinking is not depth. It's resistance. It feels productive, but it isn't. It's your mind looping the same patterns to avoid uncertainty. And the more you engage with it, the stronger it becomes. So the goal is not to eliminate thoughts. That's impossible. The goal is to change your relationship with them, to move from obedience to observation, from reaction to evaluation. The Stoics practiced this relentlessly. They called it the discipline of assent, the ability to withhold judgment until a thought proves itself. In simple terms, just because a thought appears doesn't mean you agree with it. But in modern life, we've lost that ability. We accept everything instantly, and in doing so, we surrender control. But the moment you begin to observe instead of obey, you create distance. And that distance is power. At first, it's subtle. You still hear the voice. You still feel the pull, but now there's a gap. And in that gap, you have a choice. You can follow the thought, or you can question it, you can react, or you can pause. And that pause changes everything, because it interrupts the automatic process that has been running your life. And once you interrupt it, even once, you prove something to yourself. You are not your thoughts. You are the one deciding what to do with them. If you've made it this far, it means you're starting to see what most people never do, that your mind is not always on your side. And if you're serious about mastering it, subscribe to the Stoic Legion and join those who refuse to live on autopilot. And if this is already shifting how you see yourself, drop a like, because the next part will challenge you even more. Now here's where most people think they understand, but don't. They hear this idea. You are not your thoughts, and they agree with it. It sounds good, it feels empowering, but when the moment comes, they still react the same way. The same thoughts appear, the same emotions follow, the same patterns repeat. Why? Because awareness without action changes nothing. You can recognize a toxic thought and still obey it. You can understand the philosophy and still live the same way. This is where the real work begins, not in understanding, but in practice. The Stoics didn't just think differently, they trained differently. They treated the mind like something that needed discipline, not suppression, not escape, but discipline. And discipline begins with something simple, but uncomfortable, refusing to believe your mind immediately. Think about how radical that is. Every thought that appears feels like it deserves attention. But what if it doesn't? What if most of what your mind produces is just noise? Imagine sitting by a busy road. Cars are passing constantly, loud, fast, non-stop. You hear them, but you don't chase them. You don't run after every car trying to stop it. You let them pass. Your thoughts work the same way, but instead of sitting still, most people run into the road. They chase every thought. They follow every fear. They react to every doubt, and then they wonder why they feel exhausted. The Stoic practice was different. They stood still. They observed. They let the noise pass, without turning it into identity, because the moment you attach yourself to a thought, you give it weight. And the more weight it has, the harder it is to let go. Here's an example most people will recognize. You're about to do something important. Speak, post, try, start. And then the thought appears. What if this fails? Simple thought. But then comes the reaction. You hesitate. You overthink. You delay. Now the thought has influenced your behavior, but here's the twist. The thought didn't stop you. You obeyed it. That's the part no one wants to admit. Because it means the problem isn't just the thought, it's the authority you gave it. Epictetus made this brutally clear. He said, "Do not seek for events to happen as you wish, but wish for events to happen as they do happen." Most people misunderstand this. They think it means accepting everything passively. It doesn't. It means seeing reality clearly, without adding unnecessary judgment. Because once you add judgment, you distort reality. And once reality is distorted, your actions follow that distortion. This is how small thoughts create big consequences, not because they're powerful, but because they're believed. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable again. You don't just believe negative thoughts. You defend them. You justify them. You build arguments around them. Your mind says, "You're not ready." And instead of questioning it, you look for evidence to support it. Past failures, missed opportunities, moments of doubt. And suddenly the thought feels logical. But it's not logic. It's confirmation bias. Your mind selecting evidence to support what it already believes. This is how illusions become convincing, not through truth, but through selective attention. And once you see this, you can't ignore it, because now you realize something deeper. Your mind is not just producing thoughts, it's building narratives. Stories about who you are, stories about what you're capable of, stories about what will happen next. And most of those stories are not verified. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself of this. He wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke." The key word is revoke. Not fight, not suppress, revoke, withdraw belief. That is power, not controlling what appears in your mind, but controlling what you agree with. So the next time a thought appears, don't ask, "How do I stop this?" Ask something more precise. "Do I agree with this?" And if the answer is no, let it pass. No argument, no resistance, no attachment, just distance. At first, it will feel unnatural, because you're breaking a habit that has been running for years. But over time, something changes. The thoughts don't disappear, but their influence does. You start acting faster because there's less hesitation. You start thinking clearer because there's less noise. You start feeling calmer because you're no longer reacting to everything. And slowly, you become someone different, not because you forced change, but because you stopped reinforcing what was holding you back. This is the part no one talks about. Real growth is not about adding something new, it's about removing what was never true. The doubts, the labels, the false conclusions, all of it. And what remains is clarity. There is a quiet confidence that comes from this. Not loud, not arrogant, not performative, but steady. Because now even when the voice in your head becomes harsh, you don't panic, you don't react, you observe, you evaluate. And then you decide. That is control. Not over the world, not over every outcome, but over the one place it actually matters, your mind. And once you have that, everything else changes, because you stop living in reaction and start living with intention. So here's the final question, the one most people avoid, the one that determines everything. If your thoughts are not always true, why are you still letting them decide your life? If this video changed how you see your own mind, then don't stop here. Subscribe to the Stoic Legion, because this is just the beginning of mastering yourself. And if you're ready to take control, drop a like and comment, "I take control." Not for me, but as a decision for yourself. Because the moment you stop obeying every thought is the moment you start becoming someone stronger. And that's where everything begins.